Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I have a really special deck that I recently ordered. It's been out for a couple of years, but I have recently acquired it and it's so lovely. I thought I would hop on here and share it with you. Some of you may have already seen it and that's great, but if you'd like to take a closer look or you haven't seen it yet, then please stay tuned. Okay, so the deck in question is the Stolen Child Tarot, and it was both conceptualized and illustrated by Monica L. Knighton. So this deck is an independent deck, and it was first published in 2019. My understanding is that when it first came out, it was just a major arcana deck, and I do remember hearing about it some time ago, and I didn't order it, so perhaps that's why. But since then, it's been fleshed out and has come to life as a fully fledged, complete tarot deck, even with a few extras, I guess you could say. So I will leave a link either in the comments or the description below so that you can see how to order it from Etsy if you'd like to acquire your own copy as well. So this deck is inspired by the poem The Stolen Child by William Butler Yeats. And the poem was first published in 1886. Yeats was really prolific and he had lots of fairy material as well, lots of poetry. This would be considered one of his earlier works because he had a fairly long career. This deck features no man-made objects, and it is nature-based in all of its imagery. You might add, I guess, fantasy and nature-based. So they have to get pretty creative. So when we're showing them in clothing, you'll notice we don't want man-made clothing. So we're wearing animal skins and things like that. So if you look carefully, anything that might be conceived as a tool or an object of symbolism, it will always be something natural. So we'll take a look at all of the cards in just a second. If you want to get a closer look at the box, let's do that. So it's a nice box. I like these, it's good and sturdy. If you look at the inside, you can see the link, and so you can just scan that to access the guidebook. It is a digital guidebook. The creator heavily emphasized being as environmentally responsible as she could while creating the deck and producing it. So that's one way that she cut down on some of the production and travel. So you can print it if you wanted to. You could personally print it. It's a nice PDF. So I did download it, and it had colored thumbnail images of every card. Pretty decent amount of descriptors to go with each card as well. I'm going to go back through it. I just skimmed it today, but I'm going to go back through it because it will be helpful to understand some of the changes that she made. It is, as you can tell by the title here of the first card that's showing the Fool, somewhat Rider-Waite-Smith based, but there are some strategic and clever changes that we'll look at as we go along. So I will move the box out of the way. When we think about the poem, which was the entire inspiration for the deck, it's a ballad, and it refers to Irish folklore as it describes how some fairies lure a human child away to a fairy isle, and they do so through their sweet words and promises of a life in a wild, natural paradise. And they offer an escape from the human life of suffering. And there are some repeated lines, kind of always reminding the reader of how the promise of life in the fairy realm enables you to escape the human suffering that we all face. So on the back, they have like an excerpt because there are several stanzas and a repetitive chorus in the poem. So here you can just see just a little snippet of it, but you'll hear what I'm talking about. It says, "Come away, O human child, to the waters and the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than you can understand. So that's really kind of the tone and the mood of it. It's really a lovely poem, so if you'd like to look it up, it's everywhere online, and you can read it for yourself. So I think we'll start looking at the cards, and I'll just pop them right over. The cardstock's really nice. It has a good amount of bend, as you can see, but it's still made well. And there's, I don't know, this hint of texture, appearance of texture, but I wouldn't quite call it linen, and it's a bit waxy, but it's nice. They shuffle well. They're large, which I like that, especially if they're going to have a border. So I think that's all good stuff. They are loosely based upon the Rider-Waite-Smith system of tarot. I did notice in my copy, I don't know if it's been corrected yet or not, but my copy of the guidebook, there was no world, there was no entry for the world card, but there is a world card in here. So if you're just looking at that online, don't worry, the deck itself does have a world card. And that may just have been the version of the PDF that I saw. So there are 78 cards, and there are also 2 bonus cards that come with the deck. And they are blank. And I'm deciding whether I would throw them in there for the reading or not, or maybe use them as possible signifiers. One goes landscape horizontal. It's beautiful imagery. And then the other actually has, it blends in better, but it is colored. It's blue rather than the ivory background, but at least it does follow the format of having the same size border. So I don't know. I guess it's up to you. I haven't decided yet. I also had a little gift that came. There's a few little stickers featuring the artist's artwork, which was a nice little surprise in there. All right. So things to know about the deck is that it's significantly different in imagery, but when you look closely and you read the description, it does work. It does work if you're familiar with Rider-Waite-Smith. So there's the lovers, and you have to look closely, and you see that we're pollinating, and then we have 2 instead of 1, you know, humans or changelings, children, I'm not sure which, you know. I kind of tend to think everyone's a changeling except the fool, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So the chariot, it's all just so natural, right? When we're imagining crowns, they take the form of antlers rather than something man-made. There's the Wheel of Fortune. You have to think about it for a minute. We do get that shape. At least we have the name to go on, but there's so much more iconography now to explore. Strength. So the animals changed, but essentially the symbolism is the same. The Hanged Man has a lot of depth to it. You have to look very closely. And then you see we are not just suspended from a tree, we are part of the tree here, still in a state of suspension. But this is different. And then there's so many little details that you can read to get greater depth. From the card, there's a lot to see. Temperance. Devil. The Tower, if you want to look at that for a moment. It's about to fall. And of course, a tree is home to lots of things. And here they're reminding us nature spirits as well. You can see them surrounding the tree, but then you have this, reminder there are birds. Makes you think of what else might live or dwell in or amongst the trees. As the beavers are chewing their way through the bottom, it is about to fall. I love the moon. I always love it when they associate hares with the moon. If you look closely at that moon, it's full of them. The sun's beautiful, golden. Judgment's really interesting. And again, if you look closely, things that you thought were going to be typical of the animal world look more like some kind of shifting fey creature. As caterpillar and butterfly. The world's beautiful. So now we've come to the suits. So the names of the suits, as you can see, have changed, but they still align with the 4 elements. So we have the Ace of Flame, and it's pretty obvious that it's still a fire suit, right? So that's going to match the symbolism and the structure, at least loosely, of the suit of Wands. And I read some of the descriptions of these cards in the guidebook so far, and many of them did have similar or some of the same associations that you traditionally hear with those same cards in the suit of Wands. Wow. The creativity, the uniqueness. I also love that these aren't Victorian fae. They're drawing heavily upon folklore, which Yeats was a great fan of folklore. He collected it. He was inspired by it. I know his biographer and many others are pretty convinced that he believed in the realm of fae. And he's famously quoted as saying that there are still rural folk in Ireland that believe in fairies. And no one believed him at the time when he said it. But now we know that those customs are still alive and well, and on some level, the belief is still there. Yeah, they're just not all the winged little cherubs in little dresses that you see from the Victorian era. This is going back from oral tradition. So the suit of brine is obviously a water suit, and so it aligns with the traditional suit of the cups. The Queen of Brine. The King of Brine. So the suit of Zephyrs, if you know your mythology, the Zephyr, I believe, is a Greek name for the personification of the 4 winds. There was each one assigned to a different direction, I believe, and you can also see them represented in art. So it's an air suit, and of course that will align with the traditional suit of swords. You see lots of winged creatures in this suit. Some are fae and some are not. There's so much going on in these images. And I'm thankful that they're big enough that I can appreciate it. The older I get, the tiny images just don't work for me. Just lovely. They're light and they're whimsical, but there is a darkness and a heaviness to some of them, which, although it's a fae deck, you know, it's not particularly childlike, in spite of the fact that it's about a poem focused on a child and features lots of childlike figures as well. And so the last suit is the suit of oak, and you can guess that that's our earth suit, and so it best aligns with the traditional suit of the Pentacles. Okay, I just love him. Look at that lizard's face, he's so cute. I just wasn't expecting to see him. Lovely. Badger, so always look closely. And you'll see many of our animal creatures. Well, I don't know if they're shifters or if this is just a costume. It's just a little fairy glamour. So when I think about this deck and just kind of impressions, it's really obvious that the artist's medium has lended itself well to this kind of imagery. So I know that she had original paintings in which she used watercolor, but she also used colored ink. And I don't know if that was painted on or some of our outlines and things, we drew that in. It appears so. So I think both techniques were used, but it has that soft watercolor feel, which adds to this dreamy kind of fairy tale landscape as well. The deck is definitely a must-have for collectors of fairy decks, and I would not recommend it as a beginner's first deck or even maybe their second or third deck, but I'm not saying that you have to be advanced. There just are a lot of adjustments to make based on the Rider-Waite-Smith system. I just wouldn't gift it to someone as their very first deck. That's just my opinion. But if the deck is calling to you and you're shopping for your first deck and this is the one you have to have, of course you're definitely free to order it, and it wouldn't be hard to learn the system. It just might not be my recommendation. That wouldn't be my first introduction to anything even loosely associated with Rider-Waite-Smith. Now, having said that, it's more than just a collector's deck. So it's a deck of depth. It's at least capable of depth in readings. And you can see that not just with all of the symbolism, but with all of the background that you can draw from the folklore to the poem itself, to the artist's imagery. And then of course, if you're familiar at all with Rider-Waite-Smith system, then you can draw on all of that as well. So you just have lots of layers that you can use to get really rich and interesting readings. The symbolism is lovely, and I think you could work with this deck, weekly for a year and still be discovering lots of new things. This is a keeper. So I already said it's not a beginner deck, but it is definitely an original, beautiful contribution to the world of tarot. I would say dig deep and take your time with this one if you acquire it, because it's deserving. The thought and the time that went into its conception and then its execution shows with every single card. And I'm so excited to have it in my collection, and I was really happy to share it with you. So if you already own this deck, or you have thoughts or opinions about the deck now that you've seen it here, please feel free to share them in the comments below. And I'll see you in the next video.